I've hired directly 30 SDRs at least and interviewed at least 300, something like that. And for me, hiring should be your superpower as a leader. And I don't think it's just for SDR teams, but in general, as a sales leader, you should be focusing on hiring more than anything else. A lot of companies are using AI to prospect, but not in the right way. On Twitter, that's the channel I'm getting the most messages, actually, which is funny because I know it's AI writing those messages, and it's all the time, oh, your background is impressive. By the way, we are providing this service. And I think it's a wrong way. And because of that prospect, they are going to be less paying attention to outbound outreach. And that's why I think if you are selling something right now or calling someone, you need to be relevant to them. For the past 6 months, a lot of companies or people on LinkedIn saying, oh yeah, you should buy like 100 domains and you should send a million emails per month for whatever the way they are selling it. That's fine. It's working for now. But I've seen that Google and Microsoft, they are currently working on to get into the inbox of someone. The domain needs to have some historical data. So meaning that if it's a new domain, chances to get to the inbox of someone will be close to 0%.
Welcome back to the SDR Hire podcast. Today, I got with me the founder of another podcast formerly known as the SDR Game. Someone might say my arch nemesis, but no, for real. These days, he calls the podcast the Outbound Kitchen, and his name is Elric Legloire. He's a former SDR and an SDR manager originally from France. And Elric started from a low-paying BDR job where nobody was hitting quota. He was getting paid like $10 per booked meeting and was facing toxic leadership, which I think is the scenario for a lot of us when we're starting out. But then experiences like these taught him a lot and toughened his skin a lot. And so years of doing SDR work have taught him crazy good lessons and exposed him to some amazing opportunities, because today he's running his own consulting business and a podcast called Outbound Kitchen. He's helping companies with outbound sales, advising companies, for example, like Ample Market, and he's an ambassador in a growing community called SDR Leaders of EMEA. Check them out. While he's also working remotely from Mexico. Somebody might say he's living the dream. And I've been a fan of Elric's work since the day he started the SDR Game, when I caught wind of what he was doing on LinkedIn, and I'm a fan of what he's doing today with the Outbound Kitchen. So Elric, dude, welcome to the show.
Stefan, thank you so much for this intro. That was nice. And it sounds like you practice a little bit your French to pronounce my last name. So thank you.
Oh, that was good. Okay, awesome. Before we dive into your background, I'm just like, what are you doing these days? Obviously, you transition full-time into being like an entrepreneur, solopreneur. You're doing consulting from what I can tell. You rebranded the Outbound Kitchen from SDR Game. What's going on with your world these days?
Yeah, so right now I'm still I think in the early phase of my solo business, but I'm trying to find what's working, what's the biggest challenge with outbound, even though I'm pretty familiar with the challenges of outbound building teams. I have one pillar, it's like the fractional role. So like you are talking about consulting, the goal is to help on a weekly basis some companies around outbound. I'm trying a few things because I'm still prospecting. It's not because I have a podcast or a newsletter that I'm not prospecting. If I'm talking about prospecting or outbound, I want to say, okay, here what I'm trying also, here what I'm seeing and what's working, what's not working. Because obviously, I think outbound is something you need to practice all the time. There is this part, and here on the consulting side, most of the time they are launching outbound, and most of the time it's challenging them. Why do you launch outbound right now? Can you optimize other channels first before launching outbound? And I'm not saying they shouldn't. It's more around, if you already have a marketing team, what do you do with your demo request process, for example? So that's one aspect of it. And if it's more about making their team efficient, what do they do today? How do they build this, for example? Do they do it if the BDR or account executive are building the list themselves? How much time they're spending on that? And the goal is to finding problems that they're having about efficiency, because efficiency, outbound and efficiency, it's a big topic also. So that's the other thing. Then I'm coaching right now, helping 3 reps. I'm building a coaching program. And the last thing is I'm working on the newsletter, the paid newsletter. I just launched it yesterday. The goal is to build something that people want to pay for, still figuring out. Right now I'm looking for beta testers, and we see.
That's good. If anyone would like to beta test Elric's freshly launched paid newsletter, By the way, what kind of content will you be publishing there?
So I have a list of things I can do, obviously, but if we talk about content specifically, it's deep dive on companies that's scaling, for example. So right now I'm working on Rippling. So Rippling, if you're not familiar with Rippling, it's pretty recent company because they have maybe 7 years and they have more than 3,000 employees. And Outbound is their first channel for building customer acquisition. So right now I'm writing like a big piece on them specifically, and my goal also is to also have them on the show to have like more information that you can find about them. And so this type of content, so it's deep dive on companies scaling outbound, frameworks, for example, emails, cold call scripts, stuff like that I'm not sharing on the free newsletter. It's more like in-depth content. Right now, that's the main idea, but with the beta tester, I want to focus on that specifically, what other things they could find useful. The goal is to build it with the people who will be part of it, because it's not me thinking about, hey, the way it should be.
That's cool.
You should be your product with your customer.
Real quick, if you're a sales leader or you know someone who's looking for support when it comes to cold outreach, cold calling, cold email, LinkedIn outreach, we build SDR and BDR teams for companies or complement their existing teams with top talent, remote SDRs and BDRs that are exceptional in outreach skills. So if you'd like to get in touch, just visit sdrhire.com and book a call with our team. All right, back to the show. One thing that you said I think is very interesting. Those companies that are considering going outbound, what are actually the usual situations where you find them?
Yeah.
Why are they considering outbound, especially these days? Because outbound has a reputation that it's dead. We hear that every day. Cold calling is dead. Emails are dead. Everything is dead. And yet we have companies, so many companies trying to break in and use outbound. And what is driving those companies and that demand for outbound? And what do you usually tell them?
Outbound is dead, so don't do outbound. Obviously not. Like you said, you can read that everywhere that outbound is dead. I don't think outbound is dead, but outbound is dying, yes. But I think it's not over yet. Before we talk about what I recommend, it's more on what's the current state of outbound. The way I'm seeing it right now, every channel is less effective than if you compare when I've started. You need more research, you need more quality outreach than... And I'm not saying 10 years ago was not like you shouldn't do that, but today it's more relevant than ever, because prospected, they are bombarded by cold calls, cold emails, LinkedIn messages. And so if you are not relevant in your outreach, obviously it's not going to make sense. That's the first step. And I think AI is not helping with that, because right now a lot of companies are using AI to prospect, but not in the right way. On Twitter, that's the channel I'm getting the most messages, actually, which is funny because I know it's AI writing those messages, and it's always the time, oh, your background is impressive. By the way, we are providing this service, and your background in outbound is impressive, because they use like a few things that they find in your profile and then pitch their service. And I think it's a wrong way. And because of that, prospects, they are going to be less paying attention to outbound outreach. And that's why I think if you are selling something, calling someone, you need to be relevant to them. That's a big topic right now. And right now, I think there is two situations with companies who want to build outbound. One is they don't have any channels for customer acquisition. So outbound will be the first one, which I think it's the most challenging one, because you don't have any marketing team. Maybe they have a marketing team, but most of the time they don't have a lot of customers. This one is the most challenging one, because starting outbound without marketing, without anything, it's most time consuming and it's going to take a lot of time, but it works. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's the most challenging. The second one is the conversation with a company last week about that, actually, and they already have 50 employees, never tried outbound before. So they have a marketing team, they already have a demo request process, and they even have a product-led growth motion. So here, for example, for them specifically, I wouldn't recommend focusing on outbound yet. But the thing to focus on here, it's more focused on, okay, we already have customers. Do we already have an expansion program? So meaning that, do we do for upsell or cross-sell opportunities? Because I don't think they should try doing cold outbound if they already have a brand and customers, because you need to be focused on what's the most efficient first before trying something that outbound, the win rate is lower, the length of your sales cycle is the double of demo requests normally. So it's going to take forever. But yes, you are talking to right companies, but if you have limited resources, outbound, I don't think that's the right answer for now. You should optimize what you already have first before focusing on outbound. So.
That's interesting. I agree with you 100%, especially because today launching outbound is extremely difficult from a technical standpoint. Unlike before, you could have, like maybe even a few years ago, you could have just started sending DMs, started sending news emails, right? Cold emails, calling people would pick up. You could at least pitch them whatever you're doing. You could power through those first days and get initial customers. Today, it has become so complicated to break into any account. You start sending emails, you land in spam. You start calling, your number starts getting flagged as spam. The numbers are bad. Where do you find the numbers? You find the numbers and then the data is wrong. You find emails, then you understand, oh no, I gotta verify whether these emails are good. And then the verification tool is lacking. There's this rabbit hole of so many things. It has become from one of the easiest things and the lowest barrier things that you can do to start growing a business or growing like a channel other than referrals. It has become one of the most complex. I remember I used to write LinkedIn posts saying, hey, outbound is actually one of the easiest things to do. And today that's literally quite the opposite. It's extremely hard. That's why I was actually curious, like what was going through the heads of these people considering outbound as a channel?
They want to add another channel to their customer acquisition revenue focus. So that's what they wanted to do. And they were actually, they reached out to me to say, oh yeah, we want to buy 20 domains and set up a big infrastructure to send cold emails. And I say, okay, but what do you do with your demo request process? So what's your conversion rate? Oh, I don't know. Let's start focusing on that first. Because if we talk about the domains, I'm not saying I don't recommend, but I don't know if I know right now for the past 6 months, a lot of companies or people on LinkedIn saying, oh yeah, you should buy like 100 domains and you should send a million emails per month, whatever way they are selling it. It's working for now, but I've seen that Google and Microsoft, they are currently working on to get into the inbox of someone. The domain needs to have some historical data. So meaning that if it's a new domain, your chances to get to the inbox of someone will be close to 0%, which means that if you have 100 inboxes, it means that those inboxes should have 12 months or at least, for example, of history to reach out to someone. It's working for now, but I don't know for how long. Today, it's more about focusing on optimizing what you already have, because outbound, and even for outbound, what we were talking about is if you start outbound, even though you want to start focusing on, they had 1,000 customers already. I say, okay, do you track your customers? Meaning that, do you have them on whatever you're using? Because you have tools for that, but if you don't have tools, you can use LinkedIn Sales Navigator to track your customers and when they are moving to a new company, because you should start with that. You shouldn't reach out to cold accounts, because if you reach out to cold accounts, one, you have less chances of getting a reply, and selling to a cold account that they don't know the company, they don't know the challenges you can solve, well, your win rate is going to be way lower than that. Because it's not just about outbound in terms of booking a meeting, it's outbound in terms of selling a cold account from first meeting to closing the deal. And outbound is not just booking a meeting. I imagine they saw on LinkedIn that they wanted to build this infrastructure.
We could take this in so many directions. Let me give you an example. I'm one of those guys using multiple domains and I'm sending cold emails. Yeah. Obviously, it works. It's a proven way of generating leads through outbound. However, something interesting happened that I've been doing this for so many years. I have no idea what happened. Literally, I just saw a bunch of bounces. All of my email addresses are warmed up. Nothing was in spam. Everything was going perfectly well. And I get 10 bounces one after another and it automatically stops the campaign. I'm like, what the fuck? I literally don't know what happened. So I had to come in and analyze. After analyzing, I just realized God knows what happened. I can probably assume that maybe some of the emails were already, let's say, on the verge of being blacklisted and it was bad timing. And then I can assume that Google checked maybe one of the emails got flagged as spam. Then they looked at similar emails getting sent and realized it's the same message or a similar message. I could have probably been more cautious, but the point is these things happen all the time. Everything changes overnight, and now you have to reinvent things. And I think that increases that hardship of entering outbound if you're coming in as a newbie, because like, all right, I got to figure this out myself. And I have the resources, but somebody else maybe doesn't. But what about LinkedIn? Because we've got calls, we've got, at least for the B2B tech side of things, we've got calls, we've got emails, and then we've got LinkedIn. You mentioned LinkedIn Sales Navigator and some prospecting strategies that I do actually want to ask you about, because that's your field of expertise as well. But how to leverage LinkedIn in the most proper way?
So if you think about what's the most efficient channels today, without being too technical, I think today the phone right now, it's the main channel, the most effective one, because it's not, if you compare to email, the phone. Let me explain why I'm saying that. Because like you were saying, email right now, it's really technical. Before it wasn't like super technical, because Google, Microsoft, they were not like flagging super easily domain. So you could, actually companies were using their main domain to do call outbound. Now it's a big risk using your main domain, because whatever, but you don't want to have the main domain on the domain used to call outreach, because if the marketing team is using the main domain to send emails, it's going to be a problem for them. So that's why I think cold email right now, it's maybe the toughest one to figure out because of that, because it's more technical than before. And I think the least efficient in terms of number of activities to get a reply. So it still works, but for me, it's the least efficient right now. And then the first one, but LinkedIn for me is the second, because LinkedIn is not technical. You don't need to set up an infrastructure. The only problem with LinkedIn is to scale it, because it's social media, so you can't add a lot of people, but that's why you should be thinking a lot about who you are talking with each week. If someone is accepting your connection request, for me, it's 10% of the time you have a reply, and 30 to 50% of the time it's a positive reply. So it's effective, but you have the limit of it's not scalable in the same way as calling or sending emails, for example. So you have more like a targeted approach, I think, on LinkedIn than the rest.
I think that LinkedIn, and it's funny when I hear people who are not from outbound sales industry and they try LinkedIn, and I can hear the excitement of, oh my God, how many replies, and people are very responsive over there. That depends on your expectations, but definitely LinkedIn is a tool that you, I think, make too big of a mistake as long as you stay underneath those thresholds, which is like about 20-25 connects per day, and then just not spam blasting everybody with the same message, because LinkedIn actually picks up on those. As long as you stay under those, it can be good. And then we've got the famous pitch slap, which is that you connect with somebody and then slap them with a pitch and promote your services. I have an opinion on that, but what do you think about it?
It's an interesting conversation, because pitch slapping on LinkedIn, if it's the same way they're doing it via email, that's not going to work. But I'm not against pitching on LinkedIn, and I'm going to explain why, because it depends your industry, your personas you're going after. So right now, I'm mainly focusing on sales leaders. I don't think it's the same way that I was reaching out to data leaders. Last year, I was working for a company selling to the data industry. And I'm not talking about prospect data. I'm talking about companies using BI tools like Tableau, Looker, and data warehouses like Snowflake, for example. Those personas, they are technical buyer personas, and they don't spend time on LinkedIn. So I tried the approach of trying to start a conversation, trying to understand, asking questions about their day-to-day. Hey, what tools do you use for that? Are you, for example, and it didn't work because those people are not spending time on LinkedIn, trying to be their friend. And I tried at the beginning, it didn't work. So what I did is, instead of pitch slapping, I was, like I was doing on other channels, doing some research and talking about, hey, how we could help them, and if they were interested to have a conversation. And that was it. And it worked because, and I'm going to give you an example. We had a French company, actually, I think he downloaded like something on our website. And then I reached out to him via email, on the phone, never picked up the phone, never reached out, never replied to an email. And so I connected with him on LinkedIn. He accepted my connection request, and I say, hey, I saw you download this piece of content. I'm not normally super fan of using marketing content, but here was a specific piece of content that I know that's a big change we can solve. Why I'm reaching out? Because they downloaded this. I say, oh, I saw you download this piece of paper. I have this PDF. Imagine you are facing this challenge, and actually that's something we could help with. And the guy said yes to a meeting. I said, oh, that's fine. Send the calendar. No replies. One message to follow up, no replies. Then another one, no replies. Then I'm trying other chance, no replies. I say, what the fuck? And then 3 weeks after, the guy show up again on LinkedIn, say, oh, sorry, I didn't go to LinkedIn for the past 3 weeks. I booked some time on, and that's it. I think in the sales industry, we are living in this bubble of spending all day long on LinkedIn, but that's maybe just for salespeople or marketing people, and that's it. And that's what, and I'm not saying it's right or the wrong approach, but I've done my research. I assume that maybe they are facing this problem, and that was it. So yes, I was pitching, but it was not like a random pitch. It was not like I couldn't send that to someone else. But yes, pitch slapping, just saying the same message over and over to everyone, it's not working.
I was strongly against pitch slapping because when I started as an SDR, BDR, I was doing it constantly. But then I realized some industries are different than others. And there are some prospects, just like the one in your example, who do not spend too much time on LinkedIn, right? Because the opposite of a pitch slap is starting a conversation, giving a compliment, chatting with people, and creating rapport through chatting. And when you think about it, yes, you can do that with people who are really active on the platform. But for those that are not, they're not going to engage with your conversation. And so you've got a better chance of booking a meeting with just pitching them with whatever you obviously, ideally, it's going to be relevant. There's going to be a trigger. There's going to be a reason for reaching out. That's my 2 cents after trying both. And also starting conversations takes a shitload of time, and you got to be very like dialed in and on LinkedIn all the time, asking the right questions, which sometimes can be a drag, and the SDRs don't have that amount of time. It works better for coaches and consultants and people who can dabble with it more than an SDR who has daily KPIs and number of dials they need to make.
Something also you need to be careful on is the tips you can see on LinkedIn, because if it's a consultant or a coach telling, oh, you should use this tool this way, or you should do it this way. And if they have a brand already, you should just be careful. You can test it, and if it doesn't work, it's not because of them. It's because they already have a brand and that works for them.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying here, when I'm talking about the technical person, yes, I have a brand, but for example, if I'm reaching out to a VP of data, they don't know who I am and they don't care about who I am. I was trying different things that you can read on LinkedIn, and it didn't work because some personas, they are not sales leaders, so it doesn't work with them. So.
Agreed. Going back to the different experience and different personas that you've sold to. So you've been a part of Chili Piper, which is a well-known brand in the scheduling meetings, appointment setting world. They are a competitor to Calendly. I've never actually used Chili Piper. I think I tried them once, but I was pulled into the Calendly ecosystem at some point, and I never left. But that is a very strong brand. Everybody probably knows about Chili Piper, at least in the tech industry. And I assume it was easier selling Chili Piper compared to, I don't know, something that is fairly newer when it comes to branding. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. So when I joined them, they were competing against Calendly on the scheduling part, but the main product that we are selling, we didn't have any competitors yet because it was a new product. And if we talk about Outbound, is something we forget to talk about, but are you in a crowded market, or are you building a new product that no one is using? It's not the same. You can't sell the same way as if it's a new product versus a competitive space, because if it's a competitive space, it's just, oh, they're using your competitor. Okay, let's wait the end of the contract to, yes, you can have a conversation, but they are not going to buy your product right now until the end of the contract. But if it's a new product, you need to educate them on the problems that you solve. Chili Piper, when I joined them, that was the case. So that was a new product. No one was building this. The only maybe product that you could think about being a competitor was Drift, because Drift was really big about their chatbot. And so companies were saying, oh yeah, the chatbot is better. But then you had like data about saying, yeah, but chatbots, people don't like you to use chatbot to book a demo on their website. Just to explain why we are competing chatbots. But basically, if you are filling out a form on the website to book a demo, normally the usual process is you fill out the demo, then you need to wait for an SDR to contact you to book the demo. So sometimes companies are quick, they were doing it the same day. Some companies, they were taking a week to do that. And Chili Piper was the scheduling part behind the form, so you could right away book a demo. And then you had data just to prove that using a form was way better than using a chat. That's why a chatbot was competitor. Now the space is really crowded. You have 5 competitors around this. So it's a crowded market now. But when I joined them, it was not. It was interesting because you had the full market to go after, because you could say to any SaaS companies that had a really good inbound flow because they didn't use anything most of the time.
You and I discussed about this as well, and we're both huge fans of Bilal. I remember from his cold training as well, which is you got to be aware of, are you a rip and replace type in a type of a conversation, or you're headed into a completely new market, and your talk track on a cold call obviously changes. And I can assume you were in that situation where you were selling Chili Piper's chatbots. Sometimes you would come across maybe them mentioning Drift, but it would usually be like a completely new greenfield type of conversation. How did you guys, like, was it a successful campaign? Did you guys conquer the market, or?
Yeah, so we are not, well, even that they're using Drift, we are not talking about Drift because we are not serving the, it was a similar challenge, but we were more focused on their demo request process, and we were trying to understand what's the traffic, how many reps do they have on the team. What was interesting about using Chili Pepper was it increased your conversion rate on the website. And then 2 is making easier to know which rep or SDR, account executive or SDR, will get the meeting. If you have 5 reps, it's easy, but we had customers with 2,000 reps. So how do you know who will get the meeting? So that was the value of Chili Pepper, was booking it, but also making in a fair way to send it to the right person.
Yeah. That makes sense. Interesting. And you've been a part of that company for how long?
2 years and a few months.
So you went from an SDR all the way up to an SDR manager. What did that journey look like? Because SDRs usually want to go as soon as possible from SDR to account executive, which you probably know quite well. And you went a different route, which I think allowed you to have enough understanding and knowledge about the SDR role to create the SDR game, which is also something I would like to ask you about if we have enough time. But what did that journey look like from SDR to manager?
Yeah, something I like to mention, before joining Chili Pepper, I was an SDR manager already, and I moved back to an SDR role. And some people could say, oh, that's dumb. Why are you doing that? Because it's like a step back. But for me, it was not a step back because it was during COVID and that was during the boom of tech sales. It was 2020 actually, and 2020 was a big year for tech companies because you had like companies really having a tough time. The company where I was an SDR leader, because we were mainly working with big companies that were impacted by COVID. Those companies churn. So it was like a bootstrap company. So if you in your top 10 customers, you have 3 big customers churning. Well, I knew layoffs were a small layoff was coming. So I joined Chili Pepper, and Chili Pepper for me, it was more, I knew the company was growing and it was less than 50 employees when I joined them. And I know it was growing. So I said, I don't care if I'm moving to another SDR role because it's, I like the product. I think it's an interesting space and the product was new. So that's why I said yes. Most of the time you don't hear about what you can do to get promoted. Yes, you can do a lot of things, but if the company is not growing, you are not going to get promoted, because the only way to get promoted is if someone is leaving or getting promoted. But if the company is growing, you have more options because the company will have some needs. That's why I think it's a real something underrated is joining a growing company is going to give you more doors to focus on and to have the role that you want. Because if you join a company that's not growing anymore, it can take 2 years to get promoted or something like that. So I got promoted 4 times at Chili Pepper because the company was growing, but also on top of everything I was doing, because it's not just, oh yeah, I was getting promoted just because the company was growing. No, yes, the company was growing, but I was also doing, I was a top performer. Yeah, I had a lot of success there.
Yeah. So as an SDR manager in multiple companies, and I know this is one of your content pillars that you talk about these days as well, is hiring SDRs, right? You've had the chance to hire, I can assume, hire a bunch of SDRs or at least interview a bunch of SDRs. Everybody wants to know the secret to how do I hire the best sales rep who's going to stick with me the longest and going to create a bunch of value. So how do you navigate that How do you screen SDRs? What questions do you ask? What's your secret to finding really good SDRs if you have one?
I have 20 secrets. Here's my list. So yeah, just to give some context. So I've hired directly 30 and interviewed at least 300, something like that. Hiring should be your superpower as a leader. And I don't think it's just for SDR teams, but in general, as a sales leader, you should be focusing on hiring more than anything else, because you can have the perfect process, but if you hire the wrong person, it's not going to work. And it's better to have an okay process and having a top rep, and this top rep is going to help you build the process and find what's working or what's not working. That's why I think for me, and actually because most of the time when you are moving to a leadership role, they try to coach you on, oh yeah, you should be a good coach, or you should be a good trainer, or you should be good at having tough conversations. But if you have the right people, I think it's make coaching, training, or having tough conversation easier, because leadership, I think, is a tough role, and sometimes you end up hiring people or working with people because sometimes you don't, as a leader, you don't choose who you're working with, and you have people, they don't enjoy the role anymore. So it's not you the problem, you're working with people. That's why I wanted to start with that, because that's why hiring, I think, it's super important. And now if you think about hiring specifically, for me, for SDR teams, depending on the stage of the company, because if it's a company starting from scratch, the profile will be different. I'm looking for people with experience, because at this stage, you have time to have a perfect onboarding training program or coaching program to onboard them and make them successful. Some people say, yes, you can hire junior reps and you can be coaching them and training them. But the reality is, when launching an outbound team, you, as a leader, you have a tough conversation with the leadership of the company. So you need to have success quickly. And junior reps, most of the time, they're going to take time. And I think you can hire people who don't have a SDR experience. But when you have a bigger teams, when you already have a program to making sure they can ramp up and be successful, because it's not fair for them. And I've seen a lot of companies hiring junior reps, going after companies with enterprise accounts. Oh, the SDR doesn't work, so I think we need that outbound doesn't work. You hire junior reps to do outbound on enterprise accounts, and you are the founders, and you don't spend time on coaching them. So the issue is not them. So that's why I'm saying that. And then if the way I'm thinking about it, and more about, I think for me, there is two channels that get the top candidates. It's you reaching out as a leader to candidates on LinkedIn, because most of the time you don't see leaders do that. It's the recruiter from the company doing it. I'm not saying it's not the right approach, but when you have the leader doing that, it's great. The second one is referrals. So actually 50%, 60% of SDR candidates, they were coming from referrals. So it's we are paying $2,500 if the person was hired and their probation period was approved. Because most of the time, top candidates are not active candidates, they are passive candidates. So you need to go talking to them, not waiting for them.
Yeah.
I would start with that.
I've been hiring people for the last 3 years, I think, with SDR Hire, and I learned those things the hard way. And also a few things that I see with companies, especially, let's say, a founder doing founder-led sales, trying to do something differently. They are doing outbound and it's working to an extent, and now they want somebody else to do that part of the work instead of them. They've tried to pay as little as possible to bring on somebody who's not suited for that role. I love the thing you said about the stage of the company, because if you've had 2 years of outbound sales experience in the company, you've got processes, you know what messaging works, and now you don't really need very experienced BDR to do the job, because you already have these processes. Now you can bring on board a junior rep, but if you haven't done it at all and it was just like you, and sometimes I hear founders saying, I can do 3 times their volumes. Sure you can, because you've got that experience inside already. It's embedded in you. This person needs to start understanding your company. They can't remember the stories you use to persuade the customer to come on a meeting with you. It's so many things. And I was just nodding along as you were talking.
If we talk about the CEO prospecting and comparing themselves with a junior rep, that's another problem, because one is they are the founder of the company or the owner of the company. So obviously for them, it will be much easier, because if they just say, emailing someone or calling someone and saying I'm the CEO of the company, it's not the same thing as saying I am. Yeah. So here I'm not saying, because most of the time when you're thinking about talking with reps about cold calling, it's obviously I'm not saying you should focus on being an SDR and lowering your status when you're talking to a CMO, but when you're the CEO, it's most of the time people, they are paying more attention to what you're saying more than
Exactly.
a salesperson. And I'm not talking about just SDR, but just being a salesperson. So
yeah, I agree with you. I've had this conversation so many times. But when you're looking for somebody experienced, what are some of the questions that you would ask? What do you look for in those candidates? How do you make sure that they're actually like an A player?
Okay, so most of the time, if they have experience, one thing that I will do differently is comparing junior reps, it's their coachability. Coachability is one main key criteria for sales roles in general, but coachability and how can they adapt. Why those two? Coachability is the definition of coachability, because I like to say, why is it? For example, if I give you feedback, how do you receive it and do you apply it? That's two parts. It's not just how do they receive it, it's do they apply the feedback. That's one. And then adaptability is meaning that if I'm hiring a rep from Salesforce, how can they adapt to this environment? Because if we're comparing a company with, I'm not remember exactly how many SDRs, BDRs they have at Salesforce, but maybe 2,000 or at least. The operation of a team like that, it's not the same as a team with one person. The support you get is not the same. At Salesforce, I don't think they are building their list. They have a team sending them leads, and they don't need to do that. At a small company, you need to maybe write the email. Maybe you need to write the script. Maybe you don't have all of this. So when I say, can they adapt? That's super important, because even they have experience. That's why if I'm looking for profiles with experience, I prefer people working in a startup environment, because it's a company with a lot of changes in the processes, versus a company like Salesforce. They have every resources in the world to support the team to make them successful. So it's not the same way, and the mindset as a rep, it will be different. I'm not saying don't hire someone from Salesforce. Yes, you can, but you need to assess that. I'm going to assess them on if we give them feedback, how can they do that? I want to see how they stand out on the process. If I give them, for example, always we give a case study to run during the interview, and if I give them instructions, what do they do with those instructions? Do they just follow the instruction, or do they go deeper than that? I'm going to pay more attention to sales reps from Salesforce, for example, to see if they are going above and beyond that. So, for example, then also for them specifically, what I want to do is ask questions about, I don't know if it's the right way to say that, but I don't know, are you familiar with the victim disease? Do you know what's the victim? No. Sometimes on LinkedIn you can read, you need to focus on the things you can control. And in sales, you have a lot of things you can control. You don't control your territory, you don't control your manager, you don't control if prospects are not replying to your emails. And the victim disease is trying to find those people, complaining about the things they can control. And do they take ownership of their results or their learnings? And you have a lot of people like that, unfortunately. And coaching someone like that is tough.
So how do you figure out whether they have the victim disease?
Most of the time you ask a question about their previous experience. You want to see, tell me more about your experience at Salesforce, for example. You want to try to understand that they will talk about their job, and then you ask question about, okay, what do you enjoy about this job? What you didn't enjoy? It's not a triggering question to trick them, but to see what they say about. And most of the time, people complaining, they are going to complain about something.
That's right.
If it's one, you say, okay, that's fine. But if it's three, they're complaining about something they can't control. It's going to be tough to train and coach someone around, hey, you should focus on, and what did you do? Did you find a solution? Because I think what I'm looking for is, okay, I'm not saying if they just say, okay, my territory was not good. For me, it's complaining. My territory was not good. So to fix that, I did that. Okay, here it's different. And that's something I'm looking for.
That's beautiful. Exactly.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. I love these answers. One story that I have about this, I had this girl from, I can't remember where she was from, but she worked as a BDR for 2 years or something like that at Google. And she's going to get picked up in a day. So I started reaching out to people. I was specifically just recruiting, and I started reaching out to people. And the feedback that I got, I was like, and that was a few years ago, I was like, no, like everybody was saying no thank you. And one of the sales leaders, he was like, look, because I asked them, they give me a negative reply, and I was like, what's wrong? She appears to be perfect. And they're like, yeah, but we're a startup. I'm not sure what can I do with somebody from Google who has everything. I need somebody who's gonna roll up their sleeves and get dirty. And I was just like, shit, it's so obvious, but it was a wake up call in that perspective.
That's funny because I had someone from Google. She was working for a company selling Google business services. I worked a month with this. I didn't hire this person. When I moved to leadership, they already hired this person. Unfortunately, we didn't, and we didn't continue with this person. I need to let her go because of that. Because she was doing the same thing at Google. She was thinking that's going to be the same thing. On top of that, she wasn't coachable and not applying any feedback. We had a lot of conversations. She didn't apply the feedback, so we just worked 30 days with her, and we didn't finish the...
It's really tough. And I want to ask you one last question. It's, what will AI do to the SDR or BDR role? How will AI change the BDR role going forward?
For me, AI, it's changing the role in a good sense for companies using it the right way. For the non-revenue generating activities, it's so good. For example, I'm a big fan of using Perplexity to do research on my accounts because you can find really quickly in less than 2 minutes what's relevant for them right now and not 2 years ago. So it's, for me, it's for account research or prospect research, it's a game changer more than just writing messages because you know what's relevant for them based on that, and you can do it so quickly comparing to before.
Got it. So you're saying non-revenue generating activities will be disrupted by AI in that sense. But what happens to, because there's this huge fear of being replaced by AI, by SDRs, right? And I see a lot of AI SDRs, companies creating artificial intelligence SDRs, doing this mass outreach, and like even cold calling people, like AI cold calling people and like booking meetings. From my perspective, I think those things don't stand a chance compared to a human. What are your thoughts? I know that there's a lot of...
For me, the way AI should be used by SDRs right now, it's to do the research, find contact data, because you were talking about that earlier, that finding emails or phone number is tougher. So AI should be used for that. SDRs can spend most of their time on the phone or sending emails or on LinkedIn and not manually research the account. AI, for me, it's basically giving you which account you should focus on, and based on the research that AI give you. I'm not using AI to write messages when it's more around finding what's relevant for the businesses, and so I can leverage that when I talk to them.
I started using Clay a few months ago to write my messages. I started small, and then I started finding additional use cases. And so scraping data sources and pulling out nuggets of information to use in my outreach, that's where I'm using AI for, and it's invaluable. But when I let the AI write the message, it sucks. And whatever I do, it may write 1 or 2 messages good. I give it examples, etc., and it starts screwing up after 3 or 4 examples, and I just can't make it write really good messages at scale. I know that there are companies like Salesforce where AI is writing every single message on its own, where you feed it with your ICP, with your, triggers, value propositions, etc. But I couldn't make it work for myself. I was doing it for one client, and I know Frank was actually here on the podcast as well. I know that he's selling to sales leaders, and I know he's crushing it, and he has some insane numbers when it comes to cold emails. But personally, I haven't been able to make it work. We'll have to figure it out as we go along. Okay, I really enjoyed chatting with you again, man. Hopefully we'll continue having our weekly sessions and chatting and going over the things that are happening in the industry. I really appreciate you for coming on. I appreciate you for everything you've done for the industry, for SDRs out there. I've been a fan and admirer of your work with SDR Game, now Outbound Kitchen, and your newsletter is awesome. I actually promoted it a few times myself. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your perspective and your experience that you gathered over these years, especially on the hiring side. I really enjoyed that part. Appreciate you for coming on, man.
Stefan, thank you so much for the invite. It was fun to talk about those topics, and I'm sure we are going to record more episodes to keep going, to keep talking about those hot topics. So.
Hell yeah, man. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Thanks.